Hey guys, I wanted to shoot a video kind of talking about the open and training and preparation for that, and um, some things to think about, especially if you're somebody who's trying to figure out how to best prepare for whichever stage of the competition you see yourself potentially reaching. So, first, as a recap, opens 3 weeks. The top 10% of everyone from the Open, which it's going to be unique to the continent you're in, will make it to the quarterfinals. And then um, they didn't give a percentage for the quarterfinals, but they did list a certain amount of people that they would be requiring video submission to review. So I believe for North America, it was the top 150. And then Europe was, I think, 90. And then or a few more were 60 and then 40 or something to that effect. So I would check the rule book for the more specifics on that, because I might have messed those up a little bit. Having said all that, majority of people will be making it to the quarterfinals, which is exciting. But that means your training should be a little bit different than it otherwise would be, because you need to prepare for the quarterfinals, not the Open. And the quarterfinals are not going to be the same as the Open. So the Open traditionally, of course, is 5 weeks, an event released on Thursday. Then you have till Monday to submit it, so you can do as many times as you want. So 5 events. Sometimes there was a second event, so 6 total. This year, it's only 3 weeks. Now, that doesn't mean it's only 3 events, because there could be 2 events in there, but it's only 3 weeks. Then there's a week off, and then there's the quarterfinals. And the quarterfinals are over a weekend. So in the rule book, it says that the events are either going to be released on, a Thursday or Friday, and then they're due Monday. I'm going to assume that it'll be like a Thursday release, and then you have till Monday, kind of similar to the Masters qualifier. And and of course, there's going to be 4 to 6 events, maybe more, that you're going to have to do in that time window, because we have to remember that they're trying to separate lots of people from the top 30 to 70 in their respective continents, because the next stage is the semifinals, which is essentially a regional. So that needs to be a big separator at that point. So normally you would be training and trying to peak for the Open, but now you need to be training and peaking for the quarterfinals. And so that's going to, of course, change your approach to training, because the quarterfinals is going to be different than the Open, because it's going to be over a weekend. There's going to be multiple events, whereas the Open will probably be 1 event, maybe 2, and you're only going to need to do it 1 time. You don't have to redo it, because there's so many people that are going to qualify for the quarterfinals that it's not, well, I should say for most people. If you do think that you're somebody who might be borderline making it to the quarterfinals, then yes, you would prepare for repeats. So that is a different circumstance. But I'm going to talk more specifically to people who are gunning for the quarterfinals. They're going to try to be as prepared as possible for the quarterfinals. So in principle, if your competition is a 3-day weekend competition where you're doing 2 events per day for multiple days, which is essentially what the quarterfinals is going to look like. You're going to have to do probably 2 events, on Friday, 2 on Saturday, and then maybe you're doing a couple redos on Sunday and Monday. Then in the preceding weeks, you need to be practicing that format, because your body has to get exposed to doing something challenging on Friday morning, resting 2 hours, doing something challenging at noon, and then resting, recovering, and then Saturday repeating that, etc. So you have to practice that format so your body is ready, and your mind, for what that feels like. Because if you've never done a weekend competition or something where you're doing consecutive days of effort work that's important and matters, that needs to be practiced. So Why that's important? That's going to coincide with the Open because the quarterfinals start, after the Open's done, you get a week off, and then the quarterfinals start, which means we've got to back that up now a few weeks. So that week between the Open and quarterfinals would be more of a taper deload week to a degree. You're still doing training, but the total volume would be less on that week in preparation for the next week being the quarterfinals. So the week before that, which would be week 3 of the Open, you need to be doing a tough simulation that includes the Open workout. So for example, this simulation could be Friday morning, you do the Open workout. Friday at noon, you're doing a strength battery workout. So maybe ascending cleans, double unders and rope climbs. And then in the PM, you're doing a row burpee, 15-minute AMRAP. That's, high turnover, high power. And then Saturday morning, you're doing, maybe a higher skill, handstand walk, bar muscle up, pistol, AMRAP piece. Noon, you have to do a, tough deadlift, GHG sit up, assault bike, cal piece, something like that. So that's, let's call that a simulation where you're doing different events with different characteristics to practice what you're going to have to do for the quarterfinals. Because we also have to remember that the Open has a fixed amount of movements or tools that you're going to have to use. You get barbell weights, I believe a single dumbbell, a box, your jump rope, your pull-up bar, and your body weight. So that limits a lot of the movements that can be used in the events because they, of course, want a lot of inclusion. They want, 300,000 people to do it. They don't want a small amount of people doing it, which is why they have the quarterfinals, because now a lot of people get pushed away because they're not good enough yet. And now you go to quarterfinals, and now it's supposed to be in your gym, which is, I think, what they prefaced with, which means there could be rope climbs, there could be ring muscle ups, there could be a rower, there could be GHG sit-ups. There's a lot more possibility with movements that they can utilize in those events. So your simulations now need more breadth of touches of things so that you're ready for whatever comes out, which is also why you train for, a whole year or multiple years so that you're accumulating all this work, but we don't need to talk about it right now. So back to what we were saying, here's the quarterfinal. Week before is kind of your taper where total volume is down a bit, but you're still training, you're sharpening, making sure you feel really good, and you're touching things, but you're not accumulating a ton of fatigue. You're allowing your system to adapt to all of the work you have been doing, trying to compensate, or not even compensate, but adapt's a good word. You're trying to peak the system for that next week. The week before that is the last week of the Open. So that needs to be one of your tougher simulations with regard to intensity and volume. So it needs to be really tough 2 weeks out from the quarterfinals. And that's going to include the week 3 of the Open. Then the week before that, which would be 4 weeks out, is a moderate simulation that includes week 2 of the Open, where the volume could be a little bit less, but the intensity is still high. So it's a little bit less intense than the next week. And then the week before that would be the first week of the Open, and that could be a mild simulation where you're including week 1 of the Open, and then you're doing, let's say 3 other events over the weekend. And then the next week you're doing, 4 total events. And then the next week you're doing 6 total events, just as an idea. So that would be how you'd be structuring your pre-comp build into the quarterfinals. That includes the Open events because you have to do the Open, but you don't have to redo them or spend an inordinate amount of time preparing for them because it's not going to, everything resets. I forgot to mention that. So your place in the Open has no bearing on your results in the quarterfinals. Everything resets after the Open, which also further strengthens the idea that you don't need to be redoing it because you need to be training and getting ready for the quarterfinals. So that's a pretty good overview of training and how it's going to get impacted based upon where you think you're going to finish. And even if you're pretty confident that you're going to make it to the semifinals, you're still going to need to do relatively well in the quarterfinals, especially if you're in a harder continent. So that concept of pre-competition simulation prep would be prudent. It might not be as worrisome, maybe worrisome is not the right word, but it won't stress you as much as it will other people. If you're more on the bubble and you're trying to qualify for the semifinals and you're close, then those simulations and that preparation will be more intense and more stressful than it otherwise would be, which is okay. That's part of the process. So I hope that provides some clarity on the preparation piece and how this new year and new style is going to change how you train and prepare for the respective stages of the competition. Yeah, let's see. Do I have anything else in my notes? No, that's pretty much what I have. Yeah, don't need to redo your open workouts unless you bomb or something happens. Your leaderboard outcome doesn't matter because everything resets. So the focus becomes on preparing as best as you can for the quarterfinals, which is why the inclusion of simulation preparation and using that progressively will be a great tool to make sure that you're prepared both physiologically and psychologically, because the act of competing is a skill in and of itself. So learning how to do a hard piece of work, how to refuel. So that's not something I talked about because it's lengthy and it's individualized through our general principles. But this is also something you should practice during your simulations, building into the quarterfinals, is practicing having different fuel sources to see what works best for your body. Because maybe you love, sweet potatoes and ground beef, and you eat it all the time, but between events doing a simulation, you can't eat those because your body's too stressed. It can't digest it as well. It's too heavy. So you got to sub out and choose other foods that are easier to digest and provide you the energy that you need, because that is essentially, if you boil it all the way down, like what's the differentiator between people who do well in those events and who don't, is who's recovering the best between those events so that they can maintain as close to their peak power by the last event as they were the first. That's why Rich always dominated on Sunday, is he would be less overall fatigued than everyone else because his system, for a myriad of reasons. But that's what you're trying to do with all of the preparation and the fueling, is figuring out how can I maximize recovery between events so that I have enough energy possible for all the events throughout the weekend and redos that I have to do. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any further questions, of course, myself or any of my colleagues would love to help and talk more about that with you. Always feel free to email or direct message me at Coach Sam Smith or sam@thebigdogs.com. But I wish you all the best in your preparation and in this 2021 season.
Oof.